Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. I want to remind you to please subscribe to the podcast wherever you do get your podcast. You can go to SalemPodcastNetwork.com, thecarljacksonshow.com, wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show. On Twitter and Getter, it's Carl Jackson Show. But if you put in The Carl Jackson Show, I will pop up. Also, please help our friends at MyPillow.com. Mike Lindell, the great founder and CEO of MyPillow, patriot that is providing American jobs, American products, and also providing you great deals leading into or headed into this Christmas season. You can go to MyPillow.com, click on the radio listener square, just use my name, Carl, and there are an array of products that are available to you. Some of them up to 66% off. It is unreal. I mean, you're talking about dog beds, sheets, Percale sheets, Giza Dream sheets, slippers, you name it, towels. They are available to you, or you can give them a call at 1-800-858-0263. Okay, now, having taken care of business, I want to get to my guest today. I'm really looking forward to speaking to this. Eric, it's kind of weird. I'm going to call you a young man, but this young man is absolutely brilliant. I've been reading his columns for some time, had no idea who he was. And then I heard Dr. Sebastian Gorka mention his name in a column of his, and I was like, a light went on. So I am speaking of none other than Eric Lendrum. He is the co-host at the Right Take podcast. You can find him at righttakepodcast.com. Did you say, Eric?
That is correct, Carl. Yep.
All right, contributor to AM Greatness. I read plenty of his articles at AM Greatness. And also, he is the associate producer of America First, Dr. Sebastian Gorka's nationally syndicated radio show. Eric Lendrum, man, that is a long introduction. I'm almost out of breath, but welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast.
Well, thank you. I've been looking forward to this for a very long time, and I'm honored to be on. And thanks again for having me on when you filled in for Officer Tatum.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll get into some of the news of the day, and if you go to AM Greatness on any given morning, you will see columns that Eric has put up. I mean, right away, he's got like 20,000 of them that I think he wrote this morning alone. It is insane. It literally is. I was just going through and like Eric Lendrum, Deborah Hine, Eric Lendrum. I'm like, oh my God, man, what are you on? Energy drinks every 5 minutes. But anyway, go and check out his articles. He does a great job. Eric, we were talking before we came online. There was a column that I read, and this goes back to August. As a matter of fact, I was sitting in for someone at the time. I don't recall who, perhaps Officer Tatum or Dennis Prager, perhaps Mike Gallagher. I'm not sure. But anyway, I read your column and I was like, okay, my God, Republicans are going to blow it. You wrote a column. Yes, Republicans are blowing the midterms. At the time, I was arguing, I don't know what the Republicans stand for. I knew they were coming out with this commitment to America, but I'm like, it's not enough to be against when you got so many dummy voters. Your column clarified a lot of things. Let's talk about that a little bit because you absolutely got it right. Republicans blew the midterm elections. Thank God for the House, but we still blew it. Your take.
Yeah, well, this is one case where I'm not happy about being right, but yes, I called it back in August. And that was, as I mentioned before we started recording, that was a bit of crossover from the podcast. My co-host Jacob and I started looking at in about August, in the middle of the year. We were like, okay, there's some really bad signs brewing here. I think the big one was in New York. There was a special election for, I think it was House District 19, where
correct.
The Republican Mark Molinaro, who, by the way, was the previous gubernatorial nominee who ran against Cuomo in 2018, so he had statewide name recognition. All the polls had him favored to win. It was a Biden +2 seat in 2020. He was widely expected to win. Special election. Nope, he lost. He lost by like 3 points, I think. It was a crushing defeat in an election that Republicans should have won. A swing seat, very much a bellwether seat for the election. And Jacob and I were both like, this is bad. This is bad, and something very, very wrong is happening right now. So we talked about it on the podcast, and then I made into that article where basically the premise is, once again, Republicans did what they do best: snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. Now, how did they do this? They defaulted to the one thing they love talking about more than anything else, their go-to topic: economics. They keep pretending it's the 1990s again, all over again. They say, it's the economy, stupid. It's the economy, stupid. Taxes, deregulation, debt to GDP ratio, like policy wonk nerd stuff that, I'm sorry, that doesn't win elections anymore. That doesn't excite voters. And I contrasted this with a year prior. We had, of course, the red wave in the 2021 elections, where you saw, of course, the Republicans swept Virginia. They took all 3 statewide races. They flipped the House of Delegates. And Republicans came within, I think, 3 points of flipping New Jersey, right? So, and they did that when the economy was still fine, gas prices weren't an issue, inflation was not an issue in fall of 2021. They ran on the culture war. They ran on CRT, on transgenderism, all under the umbrella of education. And it worked, and it produced a massive upset victory with this excellent bulletproof coalition, fraud-proof coalition even, of moderate suburban voters, including moderate Republicans, independents, and even some Democrats, and the Trump base. Again, Youngkin pulled this off perfectly. And then less than a year later, the GOP seemed to learn nothing. Jacob and I kept saying, run on the culture, fire up your voters, remind them they are indoctrinating white kids to hate themselves and saying, they're telling minority children, you are always victims and you must always act like victims, and white children are all oppressors. They're sexually grooming children and saying, oh, don't tell your parents about this. And if parents protest, they'll be beaten and arrested and investigated by the DOJ. Keep running on this stuff, and you guys will win. The Democrats will have nothing because they had no counter arguments to either of these. But what did the GOP establishment do? Back to economics, gas prices, inflation, which they matter, but the best way I can summarize it, those issues annoy voters. They don't anger voters. And you need to anger
That is
your
a
voters.
great, oh my God, that is a great way to put it, Eric. I mean, honestly, I've talked about this, but I don't think I've ever put it so succinctly. And you're absolutely right. I think another thing they started talking about was entitlement reforms. And I'm like, you freaking idiots. We're in the middle of a recession. Despite the fact the Biden administration isn't calling it a recession, you could call it a recession and call out the freaking lies and talk about how people are hurting and use some story, some anecdotal story, like they weren't doing anything, Eric. I'm like, this is insane. Now, we'll get to the ballot issue because I still think the ballot issue still played a major part in what we saw in 2022. But you're absolutely right. When you go back to what happened in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin, it's like, okay, you got the blueprint. Just copy the freaking thing. Why do you think the Republican Party are so freaking afraid of their own shadow that they won't take on these cultural issues unless maybe they believe what some Democrats believe? What's your take on that?
It all comes down to one man who is in the painting behind me. People watching on video notice this is that excellent painting of like all Republican presidents throughout history, Donald J. Trump, right? They would have to acknowledge that President Trump was right about everything. He started the culture war front. Back in 2016, this was revolutionary when you had previous Republican candidates saying, like you said, entitlement reform, we've got to be fiscally responsible. And maybe that means, cutting some losses on Social Security and Medicare and everything. And that, of course, led to Democrat ads showing a Paul Ryan stand-in throwing a granny in a wheelchair off a cliff. And they could credibly say that because, they want to take away granny's Medicare. Trump had to come along and kind of smack the GOP around and say, guys, come on, don't touch Social Security, don't touch Medicare. I won't do that. I'll leave that alone. I'm going to focus on things that really matter, like the border and unfair trade deals. And that was revolutionary for a Republican candidate, and it ended up winning because it didn't scare away working class voters and older voters. But the GOP learned nothing from that. And you mentioned before when Kevin McCarthy released the commitment to America, we talked about that on the podcast as well. First off, an obvious ripoff, a cheap 2022 remake of Gingrich's Contract with America, which again, in the 90s, that worked. But
exactly.
This isn't 1994. This is 2022. And, Kevin McCarthy apparently really badly wants to be Speaker Newt McCarthy instead of Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And if you read it, it's just one-page summary. There was nothing, absolutely nothing new or revolutionary, hardly any specifics, barely mentions of immigration. It wasn't an America First platform. It was a GOP conservative Inc. establishment platform.
Not to mention, and you hit it spot on, Eric. But not to mention, this took I think 18 months or something in the making. And I'm sitting there thinking, why the hell does it take you 18 months when Biden and the Democrat Party is doing something freaking monthly to destroy the country? You mean to tell me you can't plop your butt in front of a microphone, being the minority leader, and call them out on whatever is ailing the American people at the time? And I would tell listeners this. My goal when I get on radio is to make you angry against the left and what they're doing to this country so that you will get your butt up and fight. And it was like, when I read the Commitment to America, I literally went back and researched. I didn't give a damn about politics at that time. So I went back and I researched Newt Gingrich's, what was it? Contract with America?
Contract with America. Yeah.
And I sat there, Eric, and I said, okay, I completely understand why this would work in the age where social media and 30-second sound bites weren't a big deal and where people actually read. But that isn't happening. That isn't happening today. And I can remember even arguing with Republicans, and I'm like, this sucks. I'm sorry. It sucks. I mean, I grew up in the hood. There's no takeaways. There's no talking points I could walk away with that Commitment to America. And I mean, in general, yeah, it's all good stuff that I want to see happen. But I'm like, okay, you do it once you get in office, but to get you to the dance, it wasn't happening.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It did not excite voters and it did not anger voters. And it showed the GOP perhaps willingly learned nothing from President Trump's example. And again, I'm going to come back to this. I have a bit of a reputation, in case you haven't noticed, of being a massive fan of President Trump. And we're seeing right now, of course, the 2024 campaign has started. Already, there's the whole fake Trump versus DeSantis conflict. They're already pushing. You've got people hammering on Trump over everything, he cost us the 2022 midterms. So, now he's having dinner with white nationalists, like throwing everything at him again, all over again, like it's 2016 all over again, because they don't want him back, despite the incredible victories. This was one thing I had to point out, by the way, is that Paul Ryan, who is that again? Remind me again who that guy is. The other day, in the aftermath of the midterm elections, he said, Trump, I can't recall the last time the Republican Party's lost more seats under a Republican president thanks to Trump. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute, Paul. In 2018, yeah, you guys lost the House, but for I think the fourth time ever since Reconstruction, Republicans the incumbent president's party had a net gain in one other chamber. They picked up 2 seats in the Senate. That was thanks to President Trump getting out and rallying for Senate candidates. And then in 2020, President Trump lost, quote unquote, and we did lose the Senate. But in the House, what happened? We picked up 14 seats in the same election cycle. Even the mainstream media, the Associated Press and others and analysts conceded this was due to Republican excitement over President Trump being on the ballot. 14 seats, which, by the way, that's not only more than the GOP picked up in the House in the 2014 elections, the big red wave under Obama's second term. That's more seats than they picked up in the House this year when Trump was off the ballot. So objectively, by the numbers, yes, Republicans win more when Trump is on the ballot.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like the Republicans, they need a real leader. Now, I'll say this: I'm a big fan of DeSantis. I'll be frank with you. Whether it's Trump or DeSantis, I wouldn't be mad in 2024. However, I prefer it to be Trump because he's been there, he's done that. We know what he'll do. I think he's pissed off enough to make sure that he wrecks shop, and I think that we need to brawl. However, I will say leading up to, because I know they're going to throw everything at the man. I don't even talk. I didn't even talk about the Nick Fuente. I'm just like, whatever. We're going to have 1,000 of those things pop up. But I do want Trump to be I want Trump to be Reagan-esque, if you will, leading up to the 2024 election. Like, we understand the policies. We know what he will do policy-wise, but I just want him to come out. Honestly, I want him to get back on Twitter, too. I'm not even going to lie. I understand that he has a vested interest in Truth Social. I get it. But I would love him to just say, this is what I've done. This is what the Democrats are doing. This is what I can do for you once I am reelected. That's it. call it a day and let people just marinate on policy and positivity and lifting people out of the plight that the Democrat Party has put them in. And I would argue the Republican Party too. I want to go on to some of your other headlines, and I'm thinking, Eric, I was thinking about titles. I'm big with titles. I'm like, I got to think of the titles even before the show. It's the weirdest thing. But I was sitting here thinking, just going through some of your headlines, it comes to mind that I think the Republican Party as it exists today, I hate to say this because I love many other people within the Republican Party, but I always say how the left and the Democrat Party is an existential threat to America. I'm starting to feel that way about the Republican Party just because they're so damn weak. And it's almost as if they don't understand, I believe, the God-given role that they've been given to preserve our Constitution. I mean, from the traditions of Abraham Lincoln and fighting for civil rights in America, fighting against the KKK during Reconstruction. I mean, I think we were given an identity. We have an identity crisis. And I'm like, you know what? If McCarthy is weak, if Republicans are weak, hence your headline, Senate passes same-sex marriage bill, rejects religious liberty amendments. When Republicans are weak, America fails. And I think people, they don't even know how to frame this stuff, Eric. I'm like, okay, states' rights, that's a that's a federalist, that's a federalist issue. This is going to seriously undermine religious liberty. I look at the 12 sellouts that sold on or that signed on to this in the Senate. And I'm like, these people do not have an identity, or they're weak. Which is it? What's going on? And talk to us about the implications of this same-sex marriage bill.
That news. Few things really have enraged me more in recent weeks and months than the news about the gay marriage bill. I mean, think about it. Just 10 years ago, Obama and Hillary Clinton were still against gay marriage, right?
Man, crazy.
And now look where we are now. That it went, and it's true. People have said it before, the slippery slope, which is generally seen as a fallacy, a rhetorical fallacy. You start with point A, before you know it, you'll be at point triple Z. But it's not a fallacy anymore. It is a tactic for the left. It started with, gays, we just want to get married and just be with the people we love and have the same rights as you. Within 10 years, or I guess the math, now, almost 8 years now, within just 8 years from Obergefell v. Hodges legalizing gay marriage, we went from, we just want to get married, to, you are going to let us sexually indoctrinate and mutilate your kids, and if you won't let us do that, you're a bigot. And we're supposed to just go along with it. It's been said also, a criticism a lot of my friends have of the GOP, is that the Republican Party of today is just the Democratic Party of 10 years ago. The vote of the gay marriage bill proves that. You had 12 Republicans, which was enough for a filibuster-proof majority, vote for it in the Senate. And then previously, there was a previous version that passed in the House, I believe. The one that passed in the Senate had these religious liberty amendments. The one amendment that's garbage, it doesn't do anything. They rejected the amendments by Lee, Rubio, and Langford. The prior version that passed in the House, 47 Republicans voted for it. So now let's see how many more Republicans in the House vote for this one. The Republican Party does not understand yet, and that boils down to a cultural issue. It's a social issue, certainly. And I think that, again, boils down to the fiscal conservatism. They focus more on fiscal issues than the social/cultural issues. And I think a big part of that is it has an identity crisis for a number of reasons. I mean, I think the Republican Party needs to stop being the conservative party and need to be, first and foremost, an America First party. We are defined by America First, national populism, whatever that may mean. Sometimes that requires solutions that aren't necessarily conservative. When Trump came out in support of tariffs and protectionism, fighting against bad trade deals, you had conservatives saying, oh, that's not conservative because that's a form of taxes. That's a form of government control over the international economy. Yes, it is. And it's a good thing because it helps level the playing field against China and against other players on the international stage when it comes to the global economy. And this is what I think the biggest issue is. You hinted at this, again, when you had me on Officer Tatum's show. You made a very good point that the moment you said it, a million thoughts went through my head, and I'm like, I know I can't begin to address this fully because we do have time constraints. We're on the radio. But
Sure.
you mentioned that the GOP, the right as a whole, failed to even attempt to reach out to younger voters. You mentioned a piece, I think, by Evita Duffy, who I believe is with Young America's Foundation. talking about this. And I think that really is the crux of the issue. I mentioned, again, the generational divide, the age demographics, that Zoomers and most millennials voted for Democrats by 28 points in the 2022 midterms. And that's catastrophic. That's disastrous. If we don't do something about it soon, we are done as a country, and it may already be too late. And if I may, I wanted to address that, why the GOP fails so miserably with young people. I think it comes down to a very important concept that is not talked about enough that we need to start discussing more. And that is the idea of lived experiences. What do I mean by that? Now, of course, the left has tried to co-opt synonymous concepts with things like, her truth, their reality, our democracy. When Christine Blasey Ford and 1,700 other women all came out to claim Brett Kavanaugh was a professional gang rapist, the media narrative was, oh, she's speaking.
Oh my God. So true. Go ahead.
That's such a throwback, man. 2018 was wild. They would say, oh, she's speaking her truth. This clever little adjustment of language to basically get around the fact that she's lying without saying she's lying. And again, they say their reality to make it sound like something that should be objective is now subjective. Right. Now, lived experiences to me is a little different. Lived experiences can mean something like, say, a Rorschach test, right? Where, you have a blot of ink and one person sees a bat and someone else sees a butterfly. It doesn't necessarily mean either of them is wrong or right. They just see different things based on their mindset, which is crafted by their lived experiences. And the right as a whole, but especially the Republican Party, I think has been going through a serious identity crisis that has prevented it from adapting over the last few decades, primarily because, and this to me is the ultimate crux issue, they have not yet fully moved on from the Cold War. That a lot of people in the Republican Party leadership are still stuck in this mindset because, again, the Cold War, it was 50 years, right? It was a 50-year period or so. And it was the last period of our history before we could finally be the world hegemon. We were a rising power up to that point, post-World War I. Then World War II happens. We ultimately helped win that war. And we are about, the British Empire obviously is on the decline. We are finally about to be the dominant world power for the first time ever, except one thing stands in our way, the Soviet Union. So we spent half a century being the exact opposite of those dirty commies, right? We have to define ourselves as the opposite of the Russians. It defined our foreign policy, certainly, our domestic policy, our culture. You had movies like Rocky IV and Red Dawn. It was our identity for 50 years, is we are the opposite of the commies, and we are going to defeat communism. And of course, ultimately, yes, we did win the war. We won the Cold War. The Berlin Wall fell. So ever since then, the right especially, because the right certainly pushed, what is the opposite of communism? Capitalism. So we have to be as free market as possible. Fiscal conservatism, totally unchained, unrestrained free market, low taxes, deregulation, just fiscal conservatism. That's the opposite of the communists, and that's all there is to it. And the Republican Party has continued to push that in the following decades, even after, we finally became the world power. Yeah, we had a bit of a significant change in our foreign policy with, of course, the rise of Islamic terrorism after 9/11. But a lot of people on the Republican Party, leadership, think tanks, lawmakers, are still stuck in this Cold War era mindset. And why do I bring that up? Why do I say that's a problem? Because you have young voters now voting for a Democratic Party that is obviously very fiscally liberal, and all they ever hear from Republicans is, no, they're socialists, they're commies, they're socialists, don't vote for them. That doesn't mean anything to these young voters.
Thank you. Oh, God. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, no, feel free to chime in, but it's your show. Feel free to cut me off anytime. But I was born in 1994. I was born after the end of the Cold War, the end of the fall of the Soviet Union. You can hear stories. Here's the thing. You can be told stories about it. Other examples. My grandfather, he served in the Navy in World War II. He told me multiple times the story of Pearl Harbor. He was 16 years old. He was in high school. Sure. And I love hearing that story and other stories throughout history that he would always tell me. And he would tell me that story, and I would appreciate the history. But the one thing that story could never make me do is fully understand what it must have been like to be alive that day. Just as I have a bunch of little cousins, my grandfather's great grandkids, who were all born after 9/11. I was 7 years old that day. I have faint memories that day. I can tell them stories about 9/11 all I want.
Sure.
It's not going to make them understand what it was like.
Yep.
So when you have a Republican Party that just constantly lectures young voters on socialism, because Stalin and Mao Zedong, yes, learn about history learn about those evil dictators and the genocides they perpetrated. That's not going to be enough for most of them, at least. It will not be enough for them to understand what communism was like when it was actually a global existential threat. And certainly now, because, global communism is done, the Soviet Union is done, you've got a few remnants, Cuba, North Korea, but it's not the global threat, nuclear threat that it was for half a century. So when you have a Democratic Party addressing issues of today, like the student loan thing is a perfect example. Sure. And again, we addressed this on the podcast as well. When Biden first announced student loans, Jacob and I thought, did Biden just buy the midterms? Did the midterms just have a $300 billion or however much it was, a $300 billion price tag?
Right.
If so, Biden just bought it. And that, again, is addressing a very real issue for young voters. I thankfully was blessed enough to not have to take student loans, but I totally understand and relate to and sympathize with millennials and Zoomers who are crushed with 5-digit, even 6-digit student loan debt. And the Democrats at least are saying, we'll address it. And Republicans are just like, no, do it yourself, bucko. Pick yourselves up by your bootstraps, because to address that would be socialism.
Let me break in here. This was part of Avita Duffy's argument in her column that she wrote. She was talking about her college campus, and where literally Democrats were ballot harvesting, bringing up young girls, abortion, student loan debt, and Republicans were nowhere to be found on her campus. So all this, we lost because of abortion BS and all this kind of nonsense. No, these people are going to the Democrats are going to young voters. They're considering their felt needs or perceived needs or wants, and they're, hey, this is what's happening. This is how you're feeling. Hey, you know what? Vote about, you should vote. That's what they were doing. This is what Avita Duffy explained. And I'm like, for God's sakes, I don't know why the Republican Party can't adapt. Like, our principles are great. They are everlasting. I always tell people the Constitution, just like the Bible, never grows old because it always deals with human nature. But it's like Republicans do not know how to adapt. And I got to be honest with you, Eric, I was guilty of this at first when it came to Trump's trade policies. I was like, what the hell are you doing, man? Because I was not that I was a newcomer, but you got to understand, man, I grew up ghetto fabulous. And so, got in trouble with the law, all this kind of nonsense. And I didn't care about politics until God just radically changed my life. So I bought in hook, line, and sinker to the Republican Party, started listening to Rush Limbaugh, so on, et cetera. And then everything just seemed great. So when Trump came along and said that, I was like, man, what the heck are you doing, man? This is crazy. I thought he was going to be, a liberal that was going to blow up the party in that way. But I'm also a blue collar worker. I own a blue collar business to this day, because I haven't, my dream is to be a nationally syndicated radio host. I'm not there yet, obviously. So I own a blue collar business. It's the second one that I've owned. I'm a blue collar worker. When I leave the podcast, I go work like every day, average American. I go to work. And I sit here I started looking at Trump's policies and how they were impacting America and the middle class. And I was like, damn, I was wrong. The guy was right. My mission today is two things. I don't even call ourselves, you mentioned two things that I want to go back on. I don't even call myself a conservative anymore. I just scratched it off of my Twitter account. I'm like, what the hell did we conserve? We didn't conserve anything. We didn't preserve anything. I feel like we are constitutional restorationists. And now my mission is to restore America's Judeo-Christian values and the Constitution, and simply to restore the middle class in America, because I think it has been decimated. Trump did a good job trying to bring it back. This freaking Chairman King Biden in the White House right now, man, things are happening so exponentially. Man, I wrote down two notes. I want to you mentioned identity crisis. You mentioned lived experiences. Good God, I guess I didn't write. Fiscal and social issues. Forgive me, because I'm a little scatterbrained at times. But you mentioned fiscal and social issues and how Republicans have a hard time adapting. We're fiscal. And then it's like we just kind of ignore the social issues, which I think is stupid, because I think there's so many cultural battles that we could win and tie them to fiscal issues. Like, for one, growing up in the hood, I just being honest, I saw people take advantage of the welfare state all the time. It's a game. It's a game. There's probably, I don't know, 5-10% of people that really need to be on it. And the rest of them, it's a freaking game. I mean, I literally witnessed a mother when I was in a child support office paying my child support. I witnessed a mother. She had to be late 30s or something like that, maybe early 40s, explaining to her 14-year-old daughter that was pregnant how to game the system to get welfare, to get child support. I was sitting there just listening to the conversation because you would hear crap like that when you went in the child support office back in the day and sat in there. And I'm like, man, can Republicans put 2 and 2 together? Can they say that, listen, when it comes to fiscal and social issues, there's a reason why we are strong, or should be, when it comes to social issues, because they create fiscal problems. They create more welfare. They create more baby mamas. It's like they never put the 2 together. I don't even believe that you can be a fiscal conservative and call yourself or be a, what is it? I hear some people say I'm a fiscal conservative, but I'm not a social conservative. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? That doesn't even make sense to me. You can't be a fiscal conservative without being a social conservative. This is why we need to be in the culture battle.
Exactly. And there's so many good points you made there. I mean, to kind of go in reverse, I guess, people who, these trust fund babies I argue with in DC all the time who say, oh, I'm a fiscal conservative, but socially liberal. Like, they think they're so big brained. They think they're so above it all. Cause like, oh, I'm sensible about economics, but I'm socially tolerant. Like, they think that's the winning issue. For a while now, that's been portrayed as the winning issue in the aftermath of the 2012 election and the RNC's autopsy report. They always thought that was the solution. But then Trump came along and revealed that if anything, it's the reverse. We need to be socially conservative and fiscally moderate and be willing, again, to say, okay, we're fine with, keeping welfare and strengthening welfare here and there. We don't mind leveraging some taxes on foreign countries and tariffs to protect American domestic manufacturing. And that is something the GOP, again, just could not bear to change. They could not stand shifting even slightly away from the hardest right on fiscal issues. But they were willing to cede the cultural issues because, again, like you said, the gay marriage and now abortion. Trump, that's another thing. Trump ultimately brought about the single biggest conservative victory culturally, politically, in half a century. He set the stage for Roe v. Wade to finally be overturned. Reagan didn't do that. The Bushes didn't do that. Donald J. Trump did that. But again, the GOP still can't embrace him. They can't acknowledge he did anything good. They have to insist like, oh, DeSantis will be better or whatever. But it also is a matter of, as you said, the working class. I can relate to that very much. I grew up in a farm town, a lot of agriculture workers, dairies, farms, orchards. And California, certainly my area of California, I feel is a microcosm of that same issue because the agriculture community in California has been systematically ignored and deliberately crushed by the state of California over the last decade or so, between the man-made drought, that garbage high-speed rail that's cutting right through our farmlands.
I remember when that opened, Eric. I was there grand opening day to ride it. I'm sorry, just to interrupt real quick. It was jam-packed. I rode it a month later to Moreno Valley with 7 people on it.
It really is. And that is why, if there's one other politician in America today, I'm so glad to say he's a politician now. One other person I really love and respect, other than Trump, he's second to Trump, but still close to Trump in my opinion, it's Senator-elect J.D. Vance. And I read his book, Hillbilly Elegy, and that guy gets it. And certainly, his hometown, Ohio, Appalachia, the Rust Belt, that really is the epicenter of the working class being systematically and intentionally gutted by the political and economic elite in the country today. And Trump spoke to those people. That's why he won Ohio twice in a row by 8-point margins, which were landslide record margins not seen since Bush Sr. in 1988. And again, the Republican Party can only benefit from embracing a pro-working class stance. And this was one thing I'll never forget when Trump first ran in, I think it was late 2015. He gave a speech that I'm going to name drop here. The Daily Wire released an article just going nuts, just frothing at the mouth over the speech Trump gave, saying, oh my God, the article literally said, and I quote, Donald Trump tore off his mask and revealed that he's Bernie Sanders underneath. Donald Trump is a communist. Donald Trump is a socialist. Why did the Daily Wire issue this condemnation of Trump as a communist? He used the phrase working class in a speech and said the Republican Party should be the party of the working class. And I'm like, when we get to this point, because of course the communists, Karl Marx, they said workers of the world unite. So that became a big word for them. But this idea, because communists 200 years ago used the word workers, we can't ever use the word worker again.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow.
No,
I got you.
But that's exactly it. The Republican Party was so hesitant to embrace being pro-working class because it was seen as, giving handouts or whatever. When no, you are simply doing something. You're finally taking steps to help this group that really is the backbone of the United States, middle America, the working class, the ones who built this country and are now being forgotten in favor of, tech elites on the West Coast and billionaire elites on the East Coast. And Trump understood that. And that is why, again, I love that you said restorationist. The GOP should be a restorationist party. And the best way to do that is by being a nationalist party and a populist party.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I mean, really, really good stuff here. All right, let me talk to you about what's happening with Twitter. I just dropped a podcast yesterday, and I got to be honest with. Oh, you know what? Before I go to there, sorry, ADD moment. You mentioned JD Vance. I love JD Vance. You know what's funny about him is obviously, in the beginning, he was totally anti-Trump. I was anti-Trump in the beginning. I was totally a Ted Cruz guy. Got in a big argument with my buddy of the American Adversaries, a local radio show here, about that. And I was like, man, you're being defrauded, blah, blah, blah. Cruz is the guy. And then Donald Trump got in and he started deregulating. And listen, I'm one of these nerds when it comes to that. I'm like, let me just see what he actually does. And, people are saying the first 100 days, that's a lie. That's not as crucial. And I'm like, the hell it ain't. Of course it's crucial. This guy started deregulating right away. I was like, okay, he's going to be a good president. He gets it. I knew it. I was like, okay, he gets it. I was wrong. He gets it. So thank God. But going back to JD Vance, what's funny is Trump, at some point in time, I heard him mention that he had read Hillbilly. What is it? Hillbillyology or what have you?
Yep.
He had gotten, he understood the pulse of the people in part because of JD Vance, but JD Vance didn't believe him. If I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure I remember hearing some different interviews, that relates to that. So it was so it's just funny that you mentioned that. But Trump ended up being the man that JD Vance was searching for.
Exactly.
And same here, quite frankly here. Okay, just Twitter ends COVID misinformation. One of your headlines. This is absolutely huge. I don't know. And I have been very skeptical. I didn't even like Elon Musk. I hate the whole EV thing, how they're just straight up lying to people about how EVs are great for the planet. So I didn't like Elon Musk, and he got a lot of his wealth, let's face it, from government money. But I'm like, is this guy being used by God or what? Because this is huge. This is huge. I'm looking at free speech being crushed inside of the United States, Eric. And I some days I wake up pissed off. Some days I wake up depressed, not even going to lie. And I'm just like, God, we have this huge battle. And then this guy, Elon Musk, pops on the scene and does stuff where I'm like, is this too good to be true? What's going on?
Oh, that was the best news I got over Thanksgiving break, was seeing the results of Elon Musk's poll reinstating President Trump's account. That was when I knew, this is going to get good. Yeah, God uses the most unlikely people, doesn't he? There's a lot of parallels, I think, between Elon Musk and President Trump. Again, a very unlikely figure to lead this very pro-working class, for the people movement than a billionaire, not just any billionaire. This dude's literally the richest man on earth.
Right.
And yeah, there's disagreements with Musk, to be sure, politically and philosophically. But at the end of the day, he understands the importance of free speech. And Jacob and I have been talking about this privately. We're definitely going to cover this on our podcast in the coming weeks. He is doing more damage, I think, at this point, to big tech, to the left censorship game than and certainly than any bill Congress could pass. He is easily the biggest fighter we now have on our side culturally, alongside President Trump. And you see, he's going to war with Apple. The EU is threatening to ban Twitter now. That must mean he's doing something very, very right. And it's kind of, I think it's funny. I tweeted about this. It kind of ties back to this tradition that throughout American history, every now and then you have a handful of billionaires who are patriots, and ultimately, despite becoming fabulously wealthy, they don't forget their roots. They don't forget the working class who helped them rise to wealth, and they become philanthropists and they give back generously through building of schools and libraries and whatnot. J.D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Cornelius Vanderbilt, William Randolph Hearst, and others. And this is just kind of the latest example of that in modern history. Obviously, you have way more billionaires now who are woke, Bill Gates and whatnot. Sure. But you have President Trump, you have Elon Musk, Peter Thiel is another one. And I think this is just so exciting to watch the left utterly melt down because they know he's exposing the truth and there's nothing they can do to stop him. It's glorious.
It's so true. They are absolutely terrified, and they're being exposed for the little authoritarians that they are from the not so notorious KGP as a press secretary. It's insane. These people are coming out and telling us exactly who they are. I hope that more people will wake up and get this. Eric, I want to get to this real quick. We have going forwards in 2024. I've been making the case on my radio show and in my podcast. Listen, I don't care how good the candidate is. I don't care if it's Trump. I don't care if it's DeSantis. I do care, but you know what I'm saying. Okay. If we don't win the ballot battle, I think it's ballots versus whomever else. Because if I understand this correctly, we basically, the Electoral College, the Democrats have finally figured it out. They didn't give a damn, it seems to me, about it for quite some time. We won the popular vote, if you will, during this midterm election cycle. But they won more races, or we didn't win as many races as I would have liked. But you go and you look at the places where they harvested ballots, whether that be Pennsylvania, Michigan is gone. Unless Republicans straight up learn how to ballot harvest and buy in fully, that's gone. Forget that swing state. That's not a swing state. With Gretchen Whitmer over that and that legislature there, it's gone. Arizona may be gone. Pennsylvania is gone. Georgia, they're still ballot harvesting despite some of the new laws there. How important is this? We better buy into this ballot. Or at least this is, maybe you have a different take. We better buy into ballot harvesting. I wasn't even here 3 weeks ago, Eric, or we don't win. I don't care who the nominee is.
Yeah, and this is where I normally try to dispense white pills. I try to dispense good news on the podcast. This is one case where even I have to admit, after the results of these elections, even as much as I love President Trump and think he has the best shot at winning, at this point, I don't even see an electoral path to victory for any Republican in 2024. As of now, Arizona, Georgia, they're trending the wrong direction. Kemp won, but let's be honest. I think Walker's going to lose. I think Warnock is going to win re-election in the runoff there. But I agree with you. And this is where, again, the GOP needs to learn to adapt or die, because they'll say, and Republican voters understandably will say, oh, well, our principles is we support going to the polls on election day, and we don't like early voting and absentee balloting or ballot harvesting. Well, okay. Like it or not, that is the name of the game now. They have legalized in a number of states. Michigan, as you pointed out, Whitmer won by 10 points. And that was on the same day. Michigan voters voted in favor of, I think, what was it, Proposal 2, Ballot Measure 2?
Oh, right. To
legalize state-funded ballot drop boxes and, among other things, private donations to fund elections. So more Zuckerbucks, basically. So, Michigan's gone. I think Pennsylvania's gone. Arizona, maybe, probably. Georgia, half and half. It depends on the candidates. Obviously, Stacey Abrams lost, whereas Warnock is going to win. Wisconsin is still very much 50-50. Republicans actually did very well in Wisconsin, except for the governor's race. But and this is an example that can be set, that the precedent was set by none other than my home state, California. In 2016, in late 2016, California passed a law to legalize ballot harvesting. This is way before COVID happened. They legalized ballot harvesting by third parties, private organizations, Democratic organizations, whatnot. And then in 2018, I'll never forget this. I was working campaigns in 2018 for Congressman Devin Nunes' reelection and others. They were so clever about this, man. Let me tell you. The primaries unfolded normally. Republican candidates in the primaries, because we have the top two blanket primary system there.
Right.
Republicans still did just as well as they normally did. David Valadao got like 58% of the vote. A Republican candidate for state Senate here got 56% of the vote. They did well in the primaries. So Republicans were like, oh, this is going to be another breeze. We'll win these seats. Then the Democrats waited until after the primaries.
Wow, so smart.
Then the ballot harvesting. Then Valadao loses to a literal carpetbagger from Maryland. Then our state senator gets defeated. They rolled it out, and they were very clever. Then 2 years later, we have 2020. A handful of like county GOPs, Orange County and a few others, Central Valley, they begin implementing their own ballot harvesting measures. And Valadao comes back into office. We flip a couple of Orange County seats. And now here we are in 2022. People have pointed out Republicans are set to hold every single contested seat in California, and even they've already made one pickup and will probably make a second pickup. And that is because, as much as I hate to say it, the California GOP has embraced ballot harvesting.
Yeah.
And if the national GOP can learn and to do the same thing in states like Michigan, again, maybe Michigan's too much, but certainly in Wisconsin it can help, in Arizona it can help, in Georgia it can help. If they can do that, then maybe. Now, will they do that? That, of course, comes down to the RNC leadership, which I have absolutely zero confidence in. McDaniel is the absolute. McConnell's the worst, but McDaniel's a close second. I would take Mike Lindell over her. I would certainly take Lee Zeldin over her.
Sure.
But whether or not, and that may come down to local parties, maybe local central committees and state parties may pick up the slack, but they shouldn't have to. That should be the RNC's job. Will it happen in time for 2024? I don't know. I can't answer that. But that you were correct. That is what needs to happen if we're going to have a fighting chance in 24.
And I hope that the Republican Party will take up these trans Nazis, trans bullies, whatever the heck you want to call them. This issue with what is it, Balenciaga, with the what is the HHS secretary? Anyway, the guy that stole the luggage, the women's luggage. I'm reading articles on AM Greatness, or read on this morning the human trafficking issue, obviously, that's occurring at the border. And I'm like, Republicans, these are big issues. Maybe instead of just talking about open borders, because I'm from California, nobody gets that unless they see it. They don't understand how devastating it is to communities unless they absolutely see it, and they lose their freaking job. So Republicans have to do a better job of, literally, that is not a losing issue. Pedophilia is a losing issue. I'm sorry. I think these trans bullies, if we push back, that is a losing issue. Where the hell is the Republican leadership talking about this?
They don't want to be seen as intolerant. They don't want to be seen as transphobes. That's why, and I say Fox News is gone. Fox News, to me, the moment Fox News died was when they aired a segment with Dana Perino celebrating the transgender family. And this 13-year-old boy became a girl. I can't even keep track of which is which anymore. I always think when I write a story about transgenderism, I'm like, okay, what gender is this person really? Because I'm going to dead name them and I'm going to use their correct pronouns. I always make sure to do that. Between that and, of course, having Bruce Jenner on as a contributor now, he's on Outnumbered every now and then. The GOP establishment has already, and as you see it on the gay marriage bill, they've ceded this ground because they don't want to be seen as bigots or whatever. They're too afraid because they want to be able to go to their cocktail parties in D.C. with their buddies. They're friends from CNN. They're friends from the other side of the aisle. It's all, again, very much a uniparty, as cliche as that may sound. They do not represent the base, the grassroots, the working class that certainly does not want anything to do with this. They'd rather protect their own reputations and their own wealth, certainly their political status, their wealth. And that's why they don't represent us. That's why we need more people like President Trump, like J.D. Vance, like others who unfortunately didn't win this year, like Blake Masters. We need more candidates like that if we're going to have a chance at making this party representative of its base again.
Eric, you need to be a spokesman for President Trump. I'm not even joking with you. I'll be honest with you. I love Donald Trump. I love his backbone of steel. I think he has some messaging issues at times. And I just feel like if he was a better messenger or had people around him that were better messengers, he would be completely unstoppable. God's honest truth. I hope you get in his ear. I know obviously Dr. Sebastian Gorka is. I hope you'll tell Dr. Gorka to to hook you up and get you in Trump's ear, because I think you're great. You're really good with messaging. You know, I mean, I've been in this business, not the podcast world. I've only been podcasting for a year now, but just doing radio. And some people have a gift for messaging and others do not. So you can write and message succinctly. So you in the audience, you understand why I have him on, Eric Lendrum, contributor to AM Greatness, co-host of the Right Take Podcast. Find him at righttakepodcast.com. But I hope you'll get in Trump's ear. I'm being dead serious with you. Some younger people impress me. I feel like one of these old fogies now at 45. And you're one of them. You do an excellent job. I don't mean to blow smoke up your butt or try to kiss your butt. I'm definitely not trying to do that. But you're good with messaging, and that's important. I do believe if Republicans don't learn how to message, there are only hope, Eric. There are only hope. I feel like at this point in time, besides we the people. But it's a much easier battle if we have a Republican Party that's already in place that's going to fight for we the people instead of us trying to just totally take over the system. So God help us. Anyway, make sure you let people know where they can find you, best places to find you, best places to listen to you, Eric Lendrum of AM Greatness.
Well, thank you so much, Carl. Thank you. And again, for all the compliments, I really appreciate it. I certainly would love to be able to get the chance to speak to President Trump. That is, if I could work more closely with him, that is the one case in which I would ever go back into government work. I have worked in government before. It's generally not fun. Government work is not fun, but
right.
To work for that man, who I think is one of the greatest, most historical figures in American history,
sure.
And he was not done yet. He is not out of the picture yet. Yeah. That's the best part about it. But yeah, as you mentioned, they can follow my writings at American Greatness. That's amgreatness.com. The website for our weekly podcast. We took a couple of weeks break for the holidays, Jacob and I. We'll be back in the swing of things this upcoming week. Our website is righttakepodcast.com. From there, you can find the full list of social media websites and podcast platforms where we are available, righttakepodcast.com/subscribe. And you can also follow me on Gab, the alternative tech website, at Eric Lendrum. And again, thank you so much for having me on, Carl. It's been great. This has been a lot of fun. And let's get to work on fixing the GOP and saving this country.
Absolutely. Amen. Really appreciate it. All right, guys. Again, you've been listening to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast, SalemPodcastNetwork.com, TheCarlJacksonShow.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow me on social media, The Carl Jackson Show on social media. And guys, please go to YouTube, go to Rumble, and please like, subscribe, and share. That really helps us move up the charts. It helps this message of constitutional restorationism get out, and that's what we certainly need to do. We need to rebuild the middle class, and we need warriors and messengers that are going to help to make that happen, bring it to fruition, or what have you. I believe that Eric Lendrum is absolutely one of them. And then Mike Lindell, the guy is a patriot, mypillow.com. And not only do you help this podcast, but you're helping American workers, you're helping American manufacturing, and you're getting a good night's rest. You can't beat that with a bat, seriously. You sit there and think about it. So make sure you go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, use the promo code Carl, C-A-R-L, go Christmas shopping, folks, or give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. And until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you. And thank you, Eric Lendrum, for joining us today.
Thank you, Carl.